what are you serving? Why not try this recipe? This is beef rendang. It was highly requested on our website by the community, and I can't help it but to cook this recipe because it is so delicious. Now, if I could explain to you what this is all about, it is actually caramelized beef curry. Imagine the flavors, tamarind, sugar, spices, aromatics, everything all in one. Now, if you want to know how to cook beef rendang, hang on there, I'm gonna show you how to do it. Before we begin cooking, let's take a few steps back to understand rendang. Now, there are many different types of rendang, and of course, throughout Malaysia, you can find them, and also Indonesia. So, just Malaysia alone, northern Malaysia would have different types of rendang, all the way down to southern. It depends on the state, and of course, Indonesia, there are even more different types of rendang. So, if you want to know the different types of rendang and also what are the specialties, remember to send me a request on the website. First step, we are going to pound ginger, garlic, and onion. Alright, so you can blend this, but I'm going to pound it because pounding really gives out more aroma, more flavors. So start with the thicker or the tougher ingredient, that's ginger. Garlic, and also an onion. You do not need to pound it until it's too fine, just like this will do. And if you do not have a pestle and mortar, you can actually just chop them into slices. That would also work. The next ingredients to work with would be lemongrass. Now with lemongrass, it's pretty simple. Just place them into the pestle or mortar, or you can use any hard tool. Knock the lower part of the lemongrass to release its flavor. Now, if you want to learn more about ingredients, remember to check out nyonyacooking.com/ingredients, or the link is here. I have everything about ingredients over there. The next would be galangal. Again, we're just going to pound it to release its aroma. And then shallots. So small knives like this, although it's really not meant for it. Now that you have all the shallots in smaller pieces, that's when you get to pound it as well. Now after pounding or blending the shallots, we are now going to pound dried chilies. Now these dried chilies have already been processed. I removed the seeds, and that's to ensure that your rendang will not be too spicy. Check out the link here, and that's the link to the ingredients. We have a lot of information there about ingredients, how to use them, how to store them, so do check that out. Okay, I'm just going to pound it right now until it turns into paste, and then we're going to add fresh chilies. Now dried chilies I added because it is much more fragrant, and you get this fresh red chilies color, which is much more brighter. So that's why we're using both as a combination. Now everything has been blended, pounded, whatever it may be, and it's time to cook. So we're going to take this step by step. It's the traditional way. Of course, you saw me blending or pounding the ingredients bit by bit, and that's because it is the sequence of cooking. But if you want, you can blend them all together. That would also work. But this is the traditional way. It helps the flavors to come out a little bit more better, and to cook a good pot of rendang or a good bowl of rendang, you will need a good pot. And here I would love to use my cast iron pot. Now if you've seen my Instagram, it's a new cast iron pot, so it's brand new, and I love this color so much, especially the brass handle. I custom made it. So in this pot I have a bit of oil. Now remember to heat it up. Now the reason why I'm using cast iron pot is because it's really tender when using this pot, and it cooks really well because of the heavy lid, and not forgetting this little dots here actually helps to trap, first of all, the lid traps the water as it cooks, and then it falls back into the meat so that you create this really succulent meat. It's so soft and tender because of all these droplets here. So that's very helpful. Now if you do not have this pot, do not worry, you can use any different types of pots. Of course, sometimes it might take longer to cook. You need to be very careful with the heat as well to not overcook it, because it might burn quicker due to the condensation process. With cast iron pot, liquid in the pot actually reduce very much lesser when you compare it according to time. So here you can feel the heat, and that's when I'm going to add the lemongrass. So as you can see, I've already bruised it earlier. You can also just use a knife, you know. That's why I said a small knife like this is so helpful. Okay, then we're just going to add it. And we're going to cook it as medium heat. The next ingredients to cook would be the pounded garlic, ginger, and also onion. Once you have added that, we're going to add galangal. And then shallots. A good indication to know when to add the rest of the ingredients would be when it smells fragrant. So at every step you smell the ingredients that you have added before, and that's when you add the next ingredient. So you use any cutlets of beef, use the cheapest cut, that would do. And then we're going to add the pounded chillies to the beef. Then coriander powder, cumin, and fennel seeds. So you can toast all the herbs before adding them, just to enhance the flavor and the aroma. Well, if the camera is not running, I'm definitely using my hands or a bigger bowl actually. Smells so good already. If you need tips, substitutes on to cooking the best rendang that you have ever tasted, of course head on to the recipe, and that's where I actually put a lot of effort to write about each and every recipe, the ingredients. So let me know what you think when you check out the recipe. I can't wait to know. So once they are evenly mixed, and that's when we are going to add beef. What we are going to do here is to just saute the beef a little with the rest of the ingredients, and you will notice that the beef will start shrinking. And this is actually a process in rendang that cannot be skipped because you want the excess water to be released and the meat to shrink a little. That's when we get to add the other ingredients. Rendang was actually cooked for days, for many hours, and every step it is really designed to preserve the beef or meat as long as possible without the help of any refrigerator. But in today's world, it's slightly different. Although if you go back to the villages in Malaysia or Indonesia, for example, they really take effort to cook a rendang, and that's the really delicious rendang that we are trying to recreate here. So it should take about a minute or so, and that's when we can add coconut milk. So once you add coconut milk, try to increase the heat to the maximum. And once you do that, keep stirring because you do not want the coconut milk to burn, for example. So at this point of time, it's going to take slightly longer to cook, and I mean slightly meaning a few hours, until it's really tender. And over here I have tamarind, which I've already soaked with a bit of hot water, and we're going to add this to the rendang to just give it a bit more flavor. And with tamarind, be very careful to not pour the seeds in. You can of course substitute with tamarind paste if you can find. Lemon is not really going to do the cut for it because tamarind is really special, slightly sour and sweet. Oops. That was a seed. Once you've added tamarind, it's also when we will add the other marvelous flavors when it comes to rendang. The significant ingredient, and that is called curry stick. So if you want to know how to make curry stick, it's actually made out of shredded coconut. You can actually use frozen shredded coconut to make this. You need to just saute it until it's really brown, pound it until the oil comes through. So if you want to know how to make this, check out the link in the description box. I have a whole video on curry stick itself. So add this to the rendang, and that's going to give color and also this really delicious flavor that would only come from this type of curry, which is rendang. It's slightly nutty, very, very delicious. And then sugar. Now this is not just any normal sugar, this is palm sugar directly from the state of Malacca. Palm sugar or coconut palm sugar is very, very delicious, especially in Southeast Asian cuisine. It's really much more caramelized, toffee kind of sweetness instead of just flat sweetness. So use this in rendang. And of course a bit of salt. Now even adding all these ingredients makes me feel so hungry because I really want to eat this, but I have to wait for a while until everything thickens. So we're just gonna stir this from time to time. And once the heat is once it starts to boil, bring down the heat to low, let it simmer with this lid on. At the interval of every 15 to 20 minutes, just stir it a little so that it doesn't stick to the pot. Normally I do not have that experience, especially with cast iron pot. With stainless steel, for example, you would have that experience. Stir it from time to time. So I'm going to come back with the final product. So this is almost 2 hours, and as you see, the curry has already reduced, and we are going to cook it until it's much drier. The moment of truth is finally here, guys. We're going to check out the final result. Now the last few minutes of this recipe are very crucial because the rendang will start to thicken, and then it starts sticking to the pot, and then it starts to dry up and it may burn. So be very, very cautious. Keep stirring towards the end. I'd say the last 30 minutes, 45 minutes. It is also during the last 30 minutes that the oil will start to surface. So let's have a look. This is the final result. Lots of oil. Now you don't really see this until the last few minutes, and my trick, as usual, if you have seen in my other curry videos, I like to remove the oil before serving. Tilt the pot a little to let the oil just carefully flow down. This is rendang. So what happened here is that the coconut milk caramelized and the color turned into this really dark brown reddish color. Shortly before serving, add a bit of kaffir lime leaves. Now this is really to enhance the smell. Like, it's not enough, you're going to make it even more fragrant than usual. If you have turmeric leaves, you can of course add it to your rendang. It's going to be even more awesome. Imagine the flavors because we added so many different types of ingredients here. When you stir towards the end of the cooking process, be very careful because you do not want the beef to fall apart. So this recipe goes really well with nasi minyak. If you haven't watched the previous video, check that out. This is so good, guys. I'm not gonna say anything, just try this recipe. It's perfect. Try this recipe wherever you are, try this out. Now the ingredients might be a bit exotic, especially if you're living abroad. Try to look for the spices, especially at Indian grocery stores, for example, or any other Asian groceries. You will be able to find them, and you will not regret, trust me. But if you're new to rendang, you just want to try out what this whole craze of rendang is all about, check out the chicken rendang recipe. That is very, very simple. You can get the ingredients from your local grocery stores. So I'm going to end this video because I need to eat right now, and I hope that you have already enjoyed this whole video while we were cooking rendang. check out the full recipe. The link is in the description box, as I've already told you many times. And while you are there, why not create an account, join the community, tell me what to cook, save the recipes, and there's gonna be a lot more. So subscribe to our newsletter as well. Until then, as always, happy cooking!